Let's pray. Lord, thank you that we can be here this morning. God, just pray that you would bless our time together. Lord, pray that there would be good fruit from this conversation that we have, from this discussion. God, just pray that you'd continue to help us know how to lead small groups better, how to lead your people better, and God, that we would know you more through all of that. In your name we pray, Jesus. Amen. All right, this week we're kind of going to start looking outward a little bit more. And so we're going to be talking about how to reach out to others. And really the question we're asking is, how can our small groups be more missional? And we'll kind of get into that a little bit. Why do we want that to happen, that sort of thing. And that's kind of the first thing. I've got a couple verses here. The first one is the Great Commission, probably very familiar. Matthew 28, 19 through 20. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. Behold, I am with you always, to the end of the age. So Jesus, right before he ascends into heaven, gives this mission, this commission, to his disciples to go out and make more disciples. Just as he has discipled them the last 3 years, just as he has taught them about himself, and now he's died for their sins and died for the sins of the world, all who would believe. Now he's saying, okay, now go spread the good news of that message to everybody. And so there's that. We see throughout Acts this very missional nature of the church. They're constantly sharing that message and bringing more people in, going, sending. You know, Paul's going all around the world at that time, telling people about the gospel. And so we all know, I don't think anybody can deny that that's still something that we are supposed to be doing today. That we still have that mission to share Jesus with everyone. And there's definitely, we definitely can get inwardly focused, whether it's in the church or in our small groups or just in our lives, where we're thinking about how can I grow and how can I know Jesus more. And it doesn't mean we should take that out. It doesn't mean we shouldn't know Jesus more. But having that, being reminded of that, okay, this is also a mission I'm supposed to be on to share with the people around me, is also really important. Romans 1:16, for I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. Are we ashamed of the gospel? We shouldn't be. It is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes. And so if this good news really is good news, then we want to share it with other people. So we can all say yes and amen. That sounds good. We should be, spreading the gospel. And people have different thoughts and feelings about that in terms of who should be a missionary. And I think when you come to Scripture, it's pretty plain that we should all be missionaries to some extent. That doesn't mean you're going to go to a foreign country. There's plenty of people around us that don't know Jesus. However, one question that comes up is, what does this have to do with a small group? I say that because you might have different boxes in your mind. And what we were just talking about is the evangelism box. Okay, yeah, we're supposed to be evangelists. We're supposed to go out and share the gospel. And yet, isn't small groups more of an inwardly focused thing? Isn't that more of a connection with other believers, building up ourselves, building up each other? And so that doesn't fit the evangelism box. That's a different class. It's a different PP Academy class. But I think there is a connection here to small groups, and that's what we're going to talk about today, is that we do have an opportunity to be small groups on mission, and there's some different ways that we can do that. So one of the things I want to describe first is two different ways to think about being on mission, especially related to in the church and with church programs. So there's a couple different ways of thinking about it. I guess I don't need that anymore because I'm here. But on this side, you've got outreach events. So this is, when I talk about this, I'm talking about these are church-sponsored outreach events. So this was very popular in the past. In some churches, it still is very popular. Our church used to do this on a regular basis with a couple things. So one of the things, we used to have kind of a harvest party called the Candy Corn Carnival that we would do on Halloween every year. And so we would put a bunch of carnival games, blow up stuff in the sanctuary there, and we would invite people to come and to get candy. And our intention with that is this is a great place for people in the community to come to the church, and during that time we would pause and we'd give a brief gospel presentation. People could hear the gospel. There's a lot of it is just fun games to get candy, but there's certain things around that, there's like the painting, face painting while I tell you the gospel kind of stuff. There's those things, right? So interaction with the gospel. And so the idea was, this is a great opportunity. Look how wonderful this thing is. Non-Christians will come here to get their kids candy, and they will hear the gospel, and they will be saved. As time went on, and towards the last few years that we were doing it, though, what ended up happening? Who came to the Candy Corn Carnival?
Just the believers.
Yeah. And we'd get people not from our church, but as we talked to them, we found out they were just from other churches. And so we found out we're putting on an event for other Christians to come, a safe place for people to come get candy. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but it wasn't an outreach event. We also had an Easter egg extravaganza. Do you remember that at all, Chris? So, there was a pun in there. And so Saturday before Easter, we would have a big egg hunt out in the fields out here. And once again, it's the same idea. Okay, people in the people in the community, non-believers will come. And there was more truth to that probably in the 90s, I think. People were more willing to show up to that kind of stuff. Nowadays, there's just a different perspective on church. And people are less willing to bring their kids to a church than they used to be. Not always true, but a lot of the times that's true. And so on one end, you've got outreach events, and yet what we're finding is they're not working like they used to. On the other hand, you've got people on mission. And this is kind of the opposite end of that, because and we're not taking the church out of this at all. We're saying, because the people are the church, right? And so it's not so much, I have to be careful how I talk about this, because there's the structure of the church, there's Brush Prairie Baptist Church and the leadership and the money and the events and that kind of stuff. And then there's the believers in the church that make up the church. And the true church is us, the people that are there. And so we're not saying the church isn't involved in this. But our perspective on more effective outreach is that the church, leadership, classes, equips the people to go out and to share the gospel with their neighbors, their coworkers, their friends, their family. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So that's been our model. And in some ways it's harder, because you can't just say, hey, why don't you come to this Candy Corn Carnival thing, and hopefully they hear the gospel, that sort of thing. It's, I actually have to share with this person. I had a friend who, he's at a church down in Medford, Oregon, and this was one of the guys in the church said this to the lead pastor, the teaching pastor. He said, hey, I got my buddy to come to church today, so you better get him today. Like, you better preach at him, you better get him today. And the pastor was kind of like, I think that's your job. Like, that's great that he's at church, and I will preach what I'm going to preach. I'll preach the gospel, but it's going to be more effective if you're speaking into his personal life, and you have got that personal relationship with him. I think this has always been true, but especially more now. Personal relationship is the way that you have the opportunity to share the gospel with people. And it doesn't mean that other things don't work, but that's the most impactful way, is through that personal relationship. And so that brings us back to small groups. One of the things we're trying to do as a church is to equip God's people for God's mission, equip God's people to go and to know and follow Jesus by helping others to know and follow Jesus. So reaching out to others. And one of the ways that we do that is a small group. And yet there's two aspects of this in your small group, and that's what we're going to focus on today. So you hear this, what does reach out mean? What I'm talking about here is small groups on mission and small groups equipping missionaries. So what I mean by that, the first one, what do I mean by small groups on mission? I mean that our small group has the opportunity to live out the Great Commission with other people in our small group. So we as a small group can reach out to other people. So kind of taking this outreach event as the whole church and kind of changing it a little bit to small group outreach. So this is us saying together, how can we reach out to each other's neighbors, coworkers, friends, that sort of thing. Does that make sense? So we are on mission together. We're kind of acting like the microcosm of the church, saying we're gonna reach out to other people as a small group. And we'll talk about some ways that we can do that later. The other aspect of it fits more over here. How can we in our small group equip and help each other to be on mission in our personal lives? Does that make sense? And you see the kind of two different sides of that. And so, yeah, as a small group together, we have the opportunity to equip each other to live out our faith in everyday life. So this gets more to that individual. You're not doing stuff together necessarily. You're encouraging each other and equipping each other to do it in your personal life day to day. Both of those things are good things that we want to happen in the small group. And that's basically what we're going to go through today, is what are some different ideas, what are some different ways that we can do that in a small group. So let's start with that first one there. The small groups on mission, starting over here, small group outreach, small groups on mission together, some different ideas that we can do this. So the first one is service. Serving other people, serving each other, serving other people. Serving is a great way to quietly share the gospel, if that makes sense. What are some, well, there's 4 different ways that we can do this. Let me just run through these, and then I want to hear some ideas from you about what this actually could look like. So the first one is to serve each other. So, okay, this is a progression, sorry. I'm going to talk about 4 things. It's easiest to start with number 1, but if you stay at number 1, then we're missing the whole mission aspect of it. Because sometimes it's hard to say, okay, as a group, we're just going to go do this big thing. We're just going to go around the neighborhood and talk to your neighbors about Jesus. Like, that could be very threatening. You go, oh man, I don't think I want to do that. Let's start at home a little bit. We'll get used to this, and then we're going to move up. So it starts with serving each other. Start by just building a culture in the group of serving each other. This is what we talked about last week. How do you care for each other? Bringing meals to each other when people have babies, when people are sick, that sort of thing. Caring for each other. And this helps people take one step out of the inward. So this is going from me inward to us inward. So your group is still inward focused, but it's not just about me. Now I'm going outward a little bit by caring for the other people in my group. And some people haven't done much of that before, and so this is a good step for them to take. How can I think not just of myself, but I want to think of the other people in my group? So that's a good first step. Caring for the other people in your group. The next thing you can do, one step out of that, is to serve the church. So you can serve in a ministry together in the church. You can serve on the properties. So serving in a ministry together. I have an example of this that was pretty cool. In September, we did a youth group event kind of thing where we invited all of the middle schoolers and high schoolers here to have dinner, and we were talking about just what does youth ministry at the church look like? How do you get involved? What are some different things going on? That was kind of the goal of it. But we also wanted the kids to have a fun time, play some games, do that sort of thing. And because of the change in our youth ministry the last couple years, I don't have youth leaders anymore. I don't have a group of these are my 5 to 10 youth leaders that I can have help me throw this event. So I thought, who could I get to help me with this? Oh, why don't I ask my small group, see if they're interested in it? And it was so wonderful because there was a couple in my small group that I said, hey, can you take care of food for the event? Here's how many people we're going to have, and here's kind of what I was thinking, hamburgers and hot dogs. And here's how much money you have to spend. And they said, yep, we got to figure it out. And I didn't have to do anything else. And then we got a couple of the other people in our small group to help them just to do it that night. And it was awesome. Because that was off of my plate. I didn't have to think about it. But the other really cool thing is, as I was out here getting ready, spending time with the students, doing that kind of stuff, they were in the kitchen, and they're laughing, and they're having a good time. And I was kind of like, man, I'm kind of missing out on this. Like, my small group is in there having a wonderful time growing together, serving together, and I want to be a part of that. And it was a great night for them. And they ended up, because I had kind of said, once you clean up, you're welcome to leave, but they ended up kind of just sticking around and talking and hanging out with each other. It was just serving together is a wonderful way to grow closer to each other. So they, that was a really good thing for them. So as you're trying to get, okay, what is one way we can serve the church? Something like that, joining in a ministry together is a good way to do that. There's different, even like the ladies' social that's going on this weekend. If there had been a small group that said, hey, we're going to come help set up. Now, I think you've already got a team of people helping set up and that sort of thing. But different, Christmas jazz, that sort of thing. How can we come as a small group together, serve together to help with this thing? You're helping the church, but you're also growing closer together. One of the things I've thought is with our children's ministry, pre-K, nursery, pre-K, and the 1st through 6th grade, a lot of those teachers end up stuck in those ministries all year round, all the time. And a lot of them can't end up taking BP Academy classes because and they're faithfully serving. They want to be there. They want to be doing it, but they don't get a lot of breaks from it a lot of the time. One of my thoughts was, what if a small group said, hey, we're going to take over pre-K for the next 2 months. We've got it. And you work it out with Julie, and everybody's got background checks, and you got to learn how to do it. But just say, hey, and it's just for the next 2 months. It's not for the rest of our lives. But we can give some of these normal teachers a break, and we can come in and we can serve in that way. And once again, your group is going to grow closer together during that time, but you're also helping others and helping the church. You can come help out with the properties, you can show up together to the spring work day, but there's also other opportunities. If you walk around the church and you go, man, that needs to be fixed, or those leaves need to be cleaned up, bring your small group down here to come do it. There was an idea that was brought up. We'll see if we get a chance to implement it this next spring, but somebody said, what if we had different small groups adopt different flower beds at the church? And so there's a few different flower beds, and your small group just says, hey, we're gonna take this one and we're gonna plant flowers there. We're gonna make sure that they're healthy and whatever. And these are ours. So there's a lot of different opportunities. What are some other ones you can think of? Opportunities for a small group to serve the church.
I know you've mentioned it before, but not necessarily the whole church, but people in the church, like helping with moving. I've done that countless times, not only in my small group, but just people I know. Like, oh, you're moving? Like, don't even worry about it. I'll help you, because I know some people stress over it. Dude, you're good. I'll help you. I'll find other people to help you.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you do that, you can say, I'll find other people to help you, and you text a few of your friends and that kind of stuff. How much easier is it to text your small group message and say, hey, can we go help this person move? Now, both ways work fine, but when you've got that group, and you can even say, hey, our small group night is Tuesday. Can we come Tuesday night to help you move? Skip group that night. Everybody comes together and does it. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Individual needs in the church, not just ministry needs, is another great way. Someone's having a baby, and maybe they don't have a small group. Or maybe they do, but, your small group can, as a whole, help bring meals and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Probably because I'm getting old. Widows in the church.
Oh.
I'm finding there's a lot of needs there. Or people who are infirm. And to have somebody just come in and take over stuff is very refreshing to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Climb
Yeah.
ladders and change light bulbs.
Yeah.
Something simple like that is hazardous for an elderly person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, what are ways that we could help?
Seasonal cleanup, big gutters.
Yeah.
Great weeds.
And even just, you do some of those things and you just spend some time with the person. There's a lot of shut-ins that don't get a lot of interaction with other people. And how could, sometimes it's easier to go with other people. Maybe you could do it alone and you could be just as effective, but if you can grab a few others, that can be really helpful. Yeah, that's really good.
I'm finding that they also need to talk. So if you want to get work done, you need to take some people that like to talk and people that get the work done.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, come on in. So,
another generational thing is being a grandma is that you can offer to watch the kids to give mom and dad a break and
Yeah.
And especially those, and I think especially a lot have their grandparents or parents here, but those that don't, they don't have that, available.
Yeah. Yeah, could we help care for some of these young moms that
Yeah.
just need a few hours of quiet?
Mhm.
And we could come and, watch the kids for a little while. Yeah. Yeah, those are some great ideas. So this is moving. So if we started with me inward, serving my group turns me to us inward. Now we're going to them inward. Does that make sense? So we're still inward focused, though, because this is our people, this is Christians, this is the church. We're still inward focused, but we moved from me to us to them. You see the progression there? Now we're going to move out a little bit. You can serve. So we talked about serving people in your group, serving the church. Now, how can you serve your neighbors and your coworkers? Are there people in your neighborhood that need help with stuff, with yard work? Do you have, maybe it's an elderly person, maybe it's a widow that needs help with their house and they don't go to the church, but you've built a relationship with them and your small group could come over and help do yard work for a day, something like that. And this is hard because it means you have to get to know your neighbors. And maybe you do. Maybe you already know your neighbors pretty well. But it's kind of hard. I don't, I've only ever lived in the Northwest, but I've heard that the Northwest is people are a little more like standoffish and don't want to get to know their neighbors. And so it can be hard, but one of the things you can start with is by praying. Pray for opportunities with your neighbors. And then look. Pray and then look. Because God might be giving you opportunities and you're not taking them. But that's one of the things I've been doing with my neighbors. And I'll be honest, it's not some wonderful, great story. I've been praying for several years and have had a few opportunities. Jill's gotten to know our neighbor across the street somewhat well because they watch their grandkids on a regular basis. And so the kids end up coming out and playing. And so we've talked to them. And then our next door neighbor, it was actually really cool. We hadn't really talked much, and he was kept to himself, and there wasn't much there. And then I saw an ambulance out in front of his house one day, and he was back home a couple days later, maybe a week later, I don't remember, and he had. I might be mixing up my stories here a little bit because now this doesn't make sense. But I know he had a heart attack at one point. But he had fallen off a ladder at work and was off of work for a long time. And I had met him in the backyard and he told me about this. I was like, oh, wow, is there anything I can do for you? And I think he kind of thought I was just saying that to be nice. He's like, well, you can mow my lawn. He said it nicely. He wasn't sarcastic, but I can't mow my lawn right now. And it was in the springtime where it started, all of a sudden your lawn's way too high. And so I said, maybe this Saturday. He's like, well, I'm out of town. I'm like, well, are you okay if I just come over and do it? And he's, sure. I found out later he really didn't think I was going to do it. But that Saturday I just went over and mowed his lawn. And when he saw me out in the backyard the next week, he was like, he was surprised. Thank you for doing that. And that opened up. We started talking a lot more after that than we ever did before. Now, like I said, I don't have some wonderful story that he's a believer now and we have him over for dinner once a month or something like that. But there's more of a relationship there, which is cool. And he's asked for help on a couple other small things that I've been able to hop over the fence and go help him with. So anyways, all of that to say, your small group can help you with that stuff. And sometimes it's even easier for your small group to help you with that sort of thing. Somebody's moving, that sort of thing. So what are some other ideas? What could come up with your neighbors or coworkers, people that you know in your out-of-church life that your small group could help with?
Well, this sounds easy, but watch their house for them. If they leave town, they know somebody's looking over their house.
Yeah.
Property.
Yeah.
Bring a meal over to them when they're,
Back in town.
when they've gone, we're going through something,
Yeah, or even some dessert sort of thing that, it's just because, hey, we We made some extra cookies. You want some cookies? That sort of thing. Yeah. Okay. Is that what you were gonna say?
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially for like Thanksgiving that's coming up, make them like a little mini Thanksgiving
Yeah.
meal.
Yeah. And you.
Pretend you're new to the neighborhood.
That's what. If you miss that, it's hard because that's a great opportunity. And if you miss it, then it's like, hey, 2 years ago when you moved in, I was gonna bring you cookies, and here they are.
I've lived here 10 years, but we don't know you.
Yeah. Hey, but honestly,
It's an anniversary.
it would be funny, wouldn't it?
Would be?
And
Okay.
it would open, I mean, maybe they think you're super weird, I don't know, but you still could. There's something there too, you could,
I'm feeling badly I never did, so here.
yeah, yeah,
I wish I did this 2 years ago, but you know how life is.
yeah. And they would get it, and what are they gonna say, Something, how could you say, hey, my small group, we were exchanging, I don't know, bring your small group into it is one way that,
Yeah.
then they're like, what's a small group or something like that. You don't wanna be too over the top of like, ask me about my small group, but like,
Just wear a little pin.
yeah, But if you could bring up that idea of, how can, if you could bring up that idea that causes them to ask, oh yeah, I've seen cars out in front of your house on a regular basis, that can open up some opportunities to talk about it and invite them.
We actually have a small group meeting in our house and we don't have a lot of parking. So we ask our neighbor if we can park our vehicles on their, because they're right on top,
Uh-huh.
by the main road. And I said, you're welcome to come. They were already affiliated with a small group at their church.
Oh, okay. But it's still, opens up an opportunity.
And they could say to somebody else, there's a small group at that house.
Yeah,
I don't know if you knew about this, but.
yeah.
They had 3 boys that we have gotten to know, 3 young boys. And Mom started doing nursing at night. She started doing online training. And she just mentioned to me, that she works all day and then makes a quick dinner and has to get online and start studying. And so I was talking to her boys and I said, well, why don't I teach you guys to cook? So you can make meals for your mom. So I had one of them over. And I said, what do you want to cook? He said, I want to make hamburgers. I said, okay. And he said, and mashed potatoes. I said, okay, let's do hamburgers. And so we came, they came over early one day and made hamburgers and mashed potatoes. And he invited their parents over. And he was standing there with the menu saying, would you like mustard and ketchup? So it ended up being a really fun thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I said, can you do this at home? And he goes, yeah, but I don't think I have knife skills. I think I'll leave that to Mom.
So just be thinking about how could our small group interact with my neighbors, with your other people in the small group's neighbors. Are there, and if you're not looking, if you're not paying attention, you're never going to see it. But if you start looking, you start paying attention, you might start seeing opportunities to serve outside of the group, outside of the church, with the people in your neighborhood. The last one, and to be honest, this one's probably easier than the third one. But you could serve your community in a more, you could go to a soup kitchen or a community event as a group together. Honestly, that's a little bit easier because you're just showing up at an already established thing and saying, how can we help? And maybe it's a little more visible in the community. I don't know. There's some ideas here. Any other thoughts about this one? How could you serve the community in general with your small group?
I remember a couple of years, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I remember a couple of years ago, our group set up an information booth at the farmer's market. And
Oh,
so we
okay.
just manned an information booth. It was women's ministries at a farmer's market. So it was just a little of exposure and talk to
Mhm.
people.
Yeah, something like that. Mallory?
Maybe not necessarily helping people with this one, but maybe just the environment, just trash cleanup. There's just a lot of trash on the side of the roads, you just pick
Yeah.
it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe there's
Do
a-
they do that here, like as a spring, in Alaska, they have a spring cleanup day?
After the snow melts or
Yeah.
something?
And everybody goes out with bags and the, community, it's like a big, huge community event going
They
out.
go out with
trash
bags, but they leave them.
They do, but that's part of the plan, actually. They they give you bags to collect all the trash along the highways in, and then the city garbage will go pick up all the trash bags along the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if those of you that are in an HOA, we have a designated day to do that, but you can invite your small group to come with you and do that, and then you have more opportunities to talk with other people in the community too.
Yeah.
Your residential community, I guess that's more like neighbors, but, well, I think in our neighborhoods, our neighbors are the ones just right around us, you know, we don't always, unless you go to community things like that. So you really are reaching out more when you get a whole neighborhood.
Yeah.
Was that, like, just those pancake breakfasts, aren't those like?
Yeah,
That's a
yeah,
good
Hawkinson
idea.
Days, Battleground, yeah.
I have a friend from another church that every year about this time when it starts to get really cold, collects socks and blankets and then gets a group together and delivers them to the homeless, like in
Oh,
those
yeah.
areas.
Yeah, and your small group could, now, you're probably not gonna collect enough just within the small group, right? But you could do that in our church as, you know, hey, our small group is gonna do this for the next 6 weeks. You know, you check with the deacons, make sure it's not conflicting with something else that they're doing, that sort of thing. And you own it, and you guys are gonna do it, and that's great. Something we did this last week, and it's not some super amazing thing, but a couple weeks ago, actually, one of the couples in our group said, hey, we wanted to do like the Operation Christmas Child, the shoebox thing. Would you guys want to do it as a group together? I said, sure. And so they got all the shoe boxes, and then just each family went out and got stuff to put in them. And so last week we had a packing party, and we just did that as our small group together. And then we're taking them to one of the drop-off locations this next week. And once again, it's not like, oh, wow, we just totally changed the world. But there's also like a growing within our group that happened. Like, because we're not just focused on us, we're focused on doing something for other people. That's a positive thing for our group. Another way, so this is still the small groups on mission. We're on the other side now, though. So hospitality. We've talked a little bit about this. It's gotten mentioned before, but you could invite a neighbor to your group. Julie talked about that. Yeah, just invite somebody in. Hey, do you want to come to our small group? You know, this is kind of what we do. As you get to know somebody and opportunities come up, could you invite them to your group? You could invite them to, you know, I kind of mentioned last week that we do, once a month, we do a game night together. Invite them to a game night. Hey, we're having a game night with our small group, some friends of ours. That's a little bit softer, right? We're not going to be reading the Bible and doing that kind of stuff. We're just going to be playing games together. And they show up, and if they have a good time, you can say, hey, come back next week. We're not playing games, but it's the same group of people. And just inviting people in. Another one you could do is invite, I think I mentioned this earlier on in the class, but invite all your neighbors to a Matthew party. Have you heard of a Matthew party before? This is basically Matthew, the tax collector, invited Jesus over when he had a bunch of his friends, and it's kind of like Zacchaeus too. Zacchaeus did the same thing. And so you can invite your neighbors over to, whether it's a block party or a barbecue or whatever you want to call it, and invite some of your small group members, because then you have some friends there that can help you, other believers. And it's a great way to get some of your neighbors together, but also you've got your small group there to help as well. And so that can be another great idea. Just inviting people into your home. That's what we're talking about with hospitality. How can you invite your neighbors into your home in the context of your small group? You can do this individually without your small group, but your small group can help. Any other thoughts about how you could do that? Yeah.
You know, when the COVID thing was going on and we were having small groups, we're having our Thanksgiving with our small group, and we invited a neighbor to our home group Thanksgiving, because he didn't have a Thanksgiving. So I think he really appreciated that. It was fun.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, that's even a great, non-threatening way to do it. Hey, we're doing Thanksgiving dinner with some friends with our small group. Come on over. Yeah. Any other thoughts? One more thing is to be an example. So this can go both ways. You can be a bad example, you can be a bad testimony, you can be a good testimony. One of the things I remember thinking about was we started our small group. Well, we started our small group in the midst of COVID that first summer after it happened, and I remember Jill and I kind of thinking a little bit because all these cars, like what, 3 cars maybe, are pulling up to our house once a week on Tuesday nights. What do our neighbors think about that? And so that it didn't end up, nobody ever said anything. It didn't seem to change anything. But that could have been a bad example. But usually, I think it's a good example. I kind of wonder, what do my neighbors think? Every week, these same cars pull up at our house. And, it's not family getting out. I mean, maybe they think it is. I don't know. But, we notice, we pay attention to our neighbors. And, is there a consistency? People are always showing up at the same time, that sort of thing. And so, are they going to wonder, man, what do they have going on over there? And is that an opportunity to bring it up, to talk about it, to invite them in? How can our group be loving and careful when they're leaving, maybe if they're leaving late at night, that they're not being super loud and obnoxious and waking up the neighbors, that sort of thing? Be mindful of that.
Yeah, we need to work on that.
What are some other aspects of just example, just living, being a small group, wherever you guys meet, whoever hosts it in that neighborhood or at that place? Any other thoughts?
I actually have a story that was about our community in California. We had a neighbor across the street who was it she was a widow? Where? Anyway, I think I remember that she was a widow, and a bunch of people from her church came to build or fix a fence line. And the person on the other side of the fence was watching and listening, and he was kind of surprised that all these guys are getting together and they're clean cut and they're not swearing and the beer's not flowing and they're having a good time and they're getting it done and they're getting along. And he was just kind of surprised about that. And it ended up that he came to church. Is that right? He came to church and came to know the Lord and led his wife to the Lord, and then led his adult children to the Lord, which led his grandchildren to the Lord. And that, the catalyst was a fence building.
Yeah.
So there are these cool men that get together and have a good time, and, there's no foul language. And
Yeah, they're not being paid to do it. It's,
Yeah.
clearly this is, yeah.
yeah, so that, just watching that happen was a catalyst.
People outside of the church, where would they get something like that? Where would they have a community of people that would come and help them? I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't exist at all. There are communities outside of the church that exist, but most people aren't a lot of people aren't a part of something like that. And so when you can get a group of people together to help, it stands out. Any other thoughts there? Okay, so the other aspect of it is just small groups equipping missionaries. So this leans more on this side. So it's not that our group is going to be on mission together, but we're going to help each other be on mission in our individual personal lives. So the first aspect here is application. We talked about this before with the questions. Are we asking application and response questions that push people not only to trust God more with their personal stuff in life, but to reach out to the people around them? And so having that on your mind, if you've got this, how can we be on mission? How can we reach out to others on our mind as we're leading a small group? Those questions are going to come up more often. And you're going to see how this is an opportunity to interact with people, at work. And I know some people, I remember one coming up, they talked about, one of the applications out of what we were talking about is they were going to start eating lunch in the break room instead of at their desk because that gave them more interaction with other people. And it's a small step, but they're looking to be on mission at work. Other aspects about application, having application questions that push people to live differently. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. We are on the second page at the bottom, the small groups equipping missionaries, if you're taking notes or keeping track. So yeah, how can we, do your questions press people toward living out their faith at work with non-believers, or with their friends, or their kids' soccer team, or wherever it is? Are we pushing people towards that direction? Because it's not, our small group discussions shouldn't just be about personal holiness. It shouldn't just be about me growing up in Christ. It should be about that, but it also should be about me reaching out. People grow a lot when they start reaching out to people because they realize that they don't know they don't know what they need to know. They don't know the gospel well enough. They need to dig into it for themselves. Questions come up. They need answers for. It's a really good opportunity. Another thing when it comes to small groups equipping missionaries is the testimony aspect that we've talked about before, sharing testimonies. And one of the reasons this is an opportunity to equip people to be a missionary is because as they practice sharing their testimony with you, now they have a better way of sharing that testimony with others as well. There's a lot of people who have never shared their testimony before, who have never shared what has God done in my life. And if they have to figure that out for the group, they have a better handle on it, and they can share that with other people. And they might want to reword it for the way that they share it with other people that might not use the same language, know the same things. But how can I look for opportunities to share my testimony with people outside of my small group? Any other things with testimonies? Where have you seen this work? You had an opportunity to share a testimony?
I had one mentor tell me you get the bazooka comic one that you can share in 3 frames. That's the elevator testimony. Then you have the Reader's Digest testimony, which would take about 2 or 3 minutes. That if you just have a quick conversation with somebody in the grocery store. And then you have the full testimony, which would be something like I'd share with a women's group or something, 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes. But if you're prepared, if you have your highlights, then you can edit and add in your mind what is more relatable or applicable to this person's life. And if you've got it in your head and you've got it practiced, you've got it cemented, it comes up easier. God will help you pull it up when you need it. I mean, I'll forget somebody's name that I met 2 weeks ago, but God will pull up a scripture when I'm struggling on how to love on somebody and minister to somebody.
Yeah, having that, I like that, the 3 different versions of it.
You remember Bazooka Comics? It was 3 frames that was in the bubble gum. Are you too young for that? There's bubble gum that had comics in it. And they were just 3 frame comics.
He wasn't allowed to have bubble gum, so.
That's good.
The bazooka ones?
Yeah.
Especially
That's what I said, Bazooka Comics. And everybody knows Reader's Digest. That's condensed.
Yeah.
The modern version of that is the Twitter post, the Facebook post, and the blog.
Yeah.
Write that down. I'll have to figure out what those are.
That's
Yeah, Twitter post, just a couple sentences, and Facebook, you can have a little bit more, pictures maybe.
And the blog is
And the blog is the full.
That's so
full
funny.
deal.
What's great about a testimony is people can't argue with it.
Right.
You want to just be like, hey, let me tell you about Jesus. And they're like, and they've got whatever they've heard about Jesus that, now you're trying to put out fires or explain things. But starting with something like, well, can I just share what God's done in my life? And they can't be like, well, that's not true. Our whole society is built on your truth. So here, let me share my truth with you. And that it's just it's a foot in the door. It doesn't mean that they're going to be like, wow, I want to know this Jesus too. But you don't know where that can lead. And having some people to practice it with in your small group is a great opportunity. You could even do that where you say, let's share our testimonies, and then, hey, let's help each other work on them a little bit. Help me work on the 3-frame one, right? The short one. Help me work on the 2 to 3 minute one. And just getting another person's honest feedback can be helpful because you know what you know, and there can be confusing things. Somebody else that's never heard it before can help you point out some of that. So you can help each other work on how to share the gospel with other people together. The last one here is to have specific studies devoted to equipping each other to share the gospel. I think I mentioned this several weeks ago, but I didn't get the name of it, sorry, but there's like a seeker study kind of thing that you can do. And this one is actually, well, I bring this up here, but it really actually fits more with the small groups on mission. Because I had a friend who did this, and I think I described it before, where you could only come to small group if you brought an unbeliever with you. And it was a very intentional, overview of the Bible or the gospel. It was like 6 weeks or something. You want to know more about what the Bible says. And people are actually interested in that because you hear a lot of different stuff. And so the people that didn't have anybody to bring just went somewhere else and prayed during that time, which is also cool. So you could do something specific like that. That's more on the small groups on mission side. But you could, there was a guy who came and he did a workshop conference kind of thing here. I mean, it was probably 5, maybe plus years ago, but it's evangelism for quiet people. And it's how to share your faith for people who aren't hey, just walk up on the street and,
Which is 99% of us.
Yeah. I had a friend who, and so I was part of that pastor training thing, and we would, once a month, we'd meet down in Portland near Hawthorne at this church, and we'd have this weekend, and in the evenings, we'd go to dinner together, that sort of thing, and we're walking down, and he walks up to somebody selling newspapers, which was weird. I'm like, who sells newspapers on the side of the road anymore? But maybe it still happens. He goes, hey, you got the news there? Like, I got some good news for you. and he starts sharing Jesus with him, and I'm just like, I'm like, but part of me's also like really like, man, like that's awesome that he's not afraid to do that, because inside I don't, like God help me because I can't do that. And there was another time where we were just we had walked to a park during a break, and there was some guy there, and we just started talking to him, and he's just like, hey, do you mind if I just share about Jesus with you? And he shared about Jesus with this guy. So there's some people that are like that they're awesome at it. For a lot of us, we struggle with that. And so that idea of evangelism for quiet people, you could read a book together, go through a curriculum. We talked about the different studies you can do that can help encourage you to find out how to do that in ways that aren't as, this is more like, how do I talk to the people around? How do I build relationships with people at work and look for opportunities to bring Jesus into the conversation?
I have a friend, I've not seen this happen, but I have a friend who will go to the park. And if he sees somebody in the park with a phone, he'll just walk up and say, do you have a Bible app on your phone? And he uses that as a
Not so subtle transition.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's really effective for him.
Yeah. Also, just doing gospel-focused studies. In a way, everything should be Christ-centered, should be gospel-focused, should be coming back to the main focus of the Bible, which is Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, and he's coming again. But just doing some of that, helping people really know the gospel. There's probably a lot of people in the church, maybe some in this room, that you go, hey, can you what's the gospel? Give me 2 minutes. What's the gospel? And part of it is like, I need like an hour to tell you about the gospel. And I get it, but you can do it in 2 minutes. You can do it in a sentence. And having more clarity on that and helping your group have more clarity on that is going to be helpful for them to reach out to their neighbors, friends, that sort of thing. So one last thing. We could actually go through this. I don't know if we want to right now. It's on the last page here. This is an exercise that I got out of, you actually read a chapter of this book several weeks ago. It's called Everyday Church. And so this chapter was Everyday Mission. And so what the exercise, you could do this as a small group together. This is why I gave it to you. So I'll read it, kind of explain it. Here's an exercise to help identify opportunities for everyday mission. Think of all the activities, however mundane, that make up your life. First, your daily routine, traveling to work, eating meals, doing chores, walking the dog, playing with the children. Secondly, your weekly routine, grocery shopping, watching favorite television programs, exercising. 3, your monthly routine, gardening, getting a haircut, going to the movies. So you fill out all kind of a bunch of activities that you do day to day, week to week, month to month. Once you have all those filled out, you go to the bottom, and for each task, ask whether you could add, number one, a community component by involving another member of your Christian community. So this would kind of be like bringing someone in your small group into this. Number two, could you add a missional component by involving an unbeliever into it? And number three, could you add a gospel component by identifying opportunities to talk about Jesus? And so, why don't we take a few minutes here and just kind of fill this out a little bit. Start with just what are the stuff that you do day to day, week to week, and then we'll kind of come back and we'll think about how could you add some of those components to it. If anyone needs a pen, I might be able to find some. Does anyone need a pen?
I'm beginning to think my life isn't very routine.
Okay, let's talk about some of the different things. So what we're looking for is things you could involve other people in. You may have written down things that you couldn't involve other people in, right? You may brush your teeth every day, but inviting your friend over to watch you brush your teeth is probably not going to be very helpful. So are there things that you do, let's start with daily. Are there things daily that every once in a while you could invite someone in, either somebody, from church, small group, an unbeliever, or is there an opportunity there to talk about the gospel?
Drink coffee.
Yeah, drink coffee. How could you bring other people into that?
So you can go out to a place, like a sit-in, kind of like Starbucks, or you can just even invite them over in the mornings to your house.
Yeah.
They need to drink coffee to get up early to go to your house.
So they have to have a cup on their own to get to the coffee shop. Yeah, it's true. Yeah. And there's even an aspect of just saying, you know what, yeah, it's going to cost me $5 a week, but I'm going to, even if I don't have any friends, that sounds bad, but you can go interact with the barista at the coffee place once a week and become a regular, and that opens up conversation. And if you're going with that intention of how can I, okay, yeah, and
We had a friend that just did it at Albertsons.
at Albertsons, yeah.
Yeah.
Becoming a regular at a place, I'm bad at it because I don't talk enough for people to remember me. So you have to be friendly. You have to talk, and I could do it. I just need to do it. But become a regular at a place gives you an opportunity to get to know somebody a little bit better.
My friend even gets to know their names, ask how she can pray for them, and she'll go back and say, I prayed about that. What happened? Is it going okay? She's real evangelistic minded in her actions.
Yeah, that's great.
And even going, I have a friend that would every day go and have coffee and just sit there and just read his Bible at Starbucks, and it brought opportunities.
Yep.
Curious, people would, I
Yeah.
mean, that doesn't always happen. It could turn people off too, but, it was something that,
Right.
they saw him reading his Bible and curious.
Yeah. Yeah, now if you do that, you better be a good tipper.
Yeah, right, that's right. Yes, that's another witness to the.
You ever seen, I've heard about these, hopefully none of you are guilty of doing this, but there's like a gospel tract that looks like a $100 bill. And I've heard of Christians leaving that, and only that, as a tip for the waitress. And it just, typically, they're not like, oh, thank you. Like, that's wonderful.
No.
It usually has the opposite effect.
My kids need medicine.
Okay, other daily routines that,
Meals. We talked about inviting people over for meals.
yeah, we eat pretty much every day. And so some of those, maybe you don't have the opportunity, but some of those, could you go out to lunch with somebody? Could you have somebody over for dinner, breakfast, whatever it is?
And I garden every day, and that gives me opportunity, because I'm out there, so people
Yeah.
can talk to me.
Yeah. So your gardening isn't once a month. You looked at that one. Well, you have to garden more than once a month.
Been out of the season.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like how exercising's in the weekly routine.
Now that could go either way. Is that a monthly thing or a daily thing? Isn't that a yearly routine? No, I'm just kidding. But yeah. Yeah, the exercising one. I'm bad about that because I just like to get up and run in the morning early when I don't have an opportunity to invite other people into it. But it can be good. And, yeah.
You can make an opportunity, because because I meet my friend at her house that is not a believer at 4:45 in the morning.
Yeah.
That-
I could join my mom and her friend.
Right.
No, I'm just kidding.
Invite your non-Christians in to get up early and jog with you.
No, but there's even, I was thinking about you guys, because my parents are part of a running club, and so
Yeah,
they
there's a.
they get to know other runners,
Running
and
club?
most of them are not believers, or a lot of them aren't believers.
That's awesome.
So it is a really good
Yeah,
opportunity.
and you have that thing in common. Oh, you like to run too. Let's run together.
Yeah.
There's also
And for us
like,
older ones, we can walk together.
Yeah, no, the same thing with walking.
Well,
Yeah,
and there are walkers in our running club that have aged
Yeah,
out of
yeah.
running.
there's a lot of events, like, you know, if you wanna do exercising, you can also do like soccer. There's soccer groups. and
yeah. There's
sports and like anything you wanna do, even if it's just weekly, you know, being part of another group outside of, you know, your church, you know.
right.
So exercising being, you know, sports or something like
Yeah.
that, you know. There's a group in Camas that does ultimate frisbee that I was part of for a little bit.
Yeah.
It's a good place to, you know, meet people, and
Yeah,
opportunities will come when
Uh-huh.
you're hanging out with people, you know, so.
it's far too easy as Christians to insulate our lives, where our activities throughout the week are just church activities, right? I'm part of my small group, I'm part of my discipleship group, and I go to Awana, come to church on Sunday, and that's all I have time for. And yet, you don't have a lot of opportunity to interact with non-Christians, and unless you work at a place where you're doing that on a regular basis. But sports and activities, that kind of stuff outside of that, are good opportunities. Weekly routine, anything in that?
Well, I've had a girlfriend say, I'm just gonna run a bunch of errands, I haven't heard from you for a while, do you wanna just hang out while I run errands, just have lunch and, you know,
Yeah.
just some time together.
Uh-huh.
You wanna dig ditches with me?
I have some people who do that, but not me. That's the sports activity.
Yeah. You know, a really small one, and it can be hard, but taking out the trash. I remember Pastor Bob sharing that he tried to figure out if his neighbor had a routine of taking out the trash, and he would just do it at the same time. Like pulling it out to the street. And so you just, oh, hey Fred, how's it going? You know, and you got those 2 minutes there to get to know your neighbor a little bit better.
And I think that's kind of an example of, so many people, if they, in the nice time, they're in their backyards, and so noticing what happens out front.
Yeah.
Because that is an opportunity, rather than, you know, people tend to go in and be more private, and to be able to find those times.
Mhm.
Like when the kids come home from school, in our neighborhood, we have, you know, when the kids come home from school,
Yeah.
or when, you know, things that you have, you know, just noticing that.
Right. You can be out gardening when the kids
Yeah.
get to the bus stop. You know, just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, what you did with your house is actually a good example of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I was hoping you weren't going to bring that up. Because
Good stewardship.
no, it was a great idea. We just haven't lived it out as much as we wanted to.
To
And
like
so,
our seasons.
yeah, I mean, I think I shared this with the whole church a couple of years ago, but we had a water issue with our water line, and so we had to replace it. We had to dig up our front patio, and so we decided to put in a deck instead so that we could actually sit out in the front and kind of be that, we're gonna live out in front of our house. And with that idea of interacting with our neighbors more. And it's happened some, but it was a reminder this morning of, oh yeah, we need to do that better. But now it's freezing cold, so. But yeah, yeah. Monthly routines, anything?
I put hiking, like if you can get like a group together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Quilting group.
Yeah.
Unbelievers to quilting group.
Yeah, just thinking, what are some of my hobbies that I could include other people in?
Yeah, in a fabric store, a woman's cutting fabric, and I said, well, what are you doing? She goes, I'm getting a club. I said, you do it by yourself? And she goes, I used to belong to a club a long time and haven't done that, it'd be fun to do that again. I said, I know a group.
Did she come?
No, she didn't,
Okay.
but,
But,
you know,
yeah.
I gave my part.
Yeah, no, exactly, exactly.
Put down working on my car, because not like I have problems all the time, but obviously just maintenance and changing oil and stuff like that. Like all the time, my cousin Ethan, since he has a barn with a lift on the property, he's like, hey, I'm working on the car, you want to just come and hang out? Most of the time, I'm not doing much. Like, hey, pass me this.
That's exactly, yeah. So you've got the community aspect, right? Your cousin, you just have a good time with him. You could do this on your own in your driveway, but your driveway's kind of steep. But well, not anymore. You don't live there anymore.
We have no driveway.
That's true. That's even harder. So you do need to go somewhere. So, but then yeah, like you got somebody else that you know, one of your neighbors in your apartment complex that has nowhere to work on their car, and they're having trouble. You go, hey, you want to go out to my cousin's place? And yeah, good opportunities. So a lot of what we're talking about today is just good for us, recognizing opportunities, but this is a wonderful thing to do with your small group to encourage them to do the same. This is, my perspective, our church's perspective on the best place for outreach to happen. It doesn't mean we're not going to do some things in the church. The bazaar this last weekend was a great opportunity for non-Christians to show up and interact with other Christians. That's great. The ladies' social this next Saturday could be opportunities to invite non-Christians. There are church events that we're still going to do from time to time that are going to help with that. However, our main focus is how can we as believers be missionaries, be disciple makers in the communities that we're a part of. And so the question is, how can we help our small groups to be on mission together and to help each other be on mission in our day-to-day life? I think the default mode for small groups is inward. We're focusing on us. What do I get out of this? How can I grow? And I want to try to shift that to outward. Doesn't mean we're not going to do the inward stuff. We're going to do that no matter what. But how can we be thinking about the people around us, our neighbors, others? And that might start with serving at the church together, and that might grow to then building a fence for your neighbor. And that can be really cool. So let's pray. Lord, God, just pray that you would be having an impact on us in our personal lives, but also through our small groups, Lord. Just pray that you would be working through the small groups of this church, God, to be on mission, to bring the good news of Jesus to the people around us, Lord. God, it feels difficult at times in the midst of culture and people that have largely felt, at least it feels like they've largely turned away from God and are not open to hearing it. And yet, God, we know that you can work on people's hearts, you can soften them. So God, pray that you would do that and you would give us courage to share that message of the good news with people around us. In your name we pray, Jesus. Amen.